Hello, everybody. Welcome to this month's edition of the Wellness Policy. My name is Wai Ting, and I'm back here with my very, very good friends, Jordan, Goodman, and Neal. Oops. Oh, God.
Oh, we love reindeer.
Man, damn it. I was on such a good streak of that not happening. I feel like I've gone like a year or two without that happening, but
Why is loop the default?
I don't know. Amateur
to these
hour
people.
here, really. So apologies. Let's start this all over again. Welcome everybody to the Wellness Policy. I am here with my very good friends, Jordan Goodman and Neal Flanagan. How are you guys doing?
Yes. Hello. Feeling pretty good today. Wait, it's good to see you. In the cap. Neal, you got the cap too.
Yep.
Not planned, I'd assume.
I think we wear these every month.
I should
very fond of
know
this
better.
hat.
I should know better than to I should get a different color or something, you know. Neal's got the same blue, navy blue, sort of like dad cappy type of thing.
Yeah.
Well, it's easy. Like
your brim is a wee bit more snapback type.
I got mine from Uniqlo.
Youthful.
Where did you get yours?
It was, I forget the brand. It's kind of a boating. They make deck shoes and things like that, so it's nautical.
We should have coordinated better, I think, you know.
Next month.
Or maybe Jordan, you should get one too, and that way.
We talked about this. I think I'm not a hat guy. I'm the headband guy. The headband is, I guess, it's what the hat is to you. Like if you don't want to do something with the hair, but I guess Neal, you don't even have hair. So what's the hat about?
I like hats. I wear them all the time. A bit like Braden, you know. I can take it off, but I'm not going to. But yeah, I remember you wearing the post snapback hat backwards, Jordan, on one of our episodes. That was
Dreadful.
a good look.
Yeah, that was a great look.
Okay. This is not a show about hats. It's about our lives, and it is about our identities. It is about our feelings when it comes to our identities, because we are here to talk about a very, very potentially sensitive topic in our world, all of our worlds, the topic of aging.
Ooh.
Getting older.
Ooh.
The passage of time. Getting closer to death. All these things. Now, we didn't know we were going to talk about this until, I would say, less than 24 hours ago. You know, we didn't really come into this episode with too much of a plan. We just decided to, we often just kind of getting on a call between the three of us just to really catch up with each other. And then from that conversation, I suppose, we tend to find something that we might want to talk a little bit more at length about. And I don't even usually talk about these sort of like pre-show meetings, but in this case, I felt like it might be a bit worthwhile because... and I don't even... What was that? The hell was that? An echo?
Was that a guest waiting to join us? Oh, Neal, look at you.
Okay,
I love that.
Okay,
Sorry.
anyway. Yeah, amateur hour, as I
One
said.
of those elderly faux pas, perhaps.
Yeah.
So I only mentioned this pre-show meeting because there was a bit of a revelation that came out of this pre-show chat. And you two know each other very well. I mean, I know you two decently, but I would say, Jordan, you know Neal really well, right?
Yeah, we are dear friends, I would say. We also work in a coaching capacity. He's been a weekly client of mine for a few years now. But yeah, I mean, we're in pretty regular touch.
You know, his family relationships, I would assume, you know his work, you know a lot of the things that are on his mind, I suppose, on a day-to-day basis. You know his history, but did you know his age?
No, I did not. And he revealed it to us in private yesterday. And so I was under the assumption he was like 43, 44, like closer to mid 40s. That was my assumption. Wait, I don't know how that actually formed as an assumption. Wade, did you have an assumption?
I didn't even know. Like, I guess I would have guessed maybe early 40s if I had to take a guess. But like, if Neil had told me like he was younger than me, even I think I would have believed it.
How old are you, Wai?
I'm 38.
Oh,
wait, no, I'm 39. I'm
39.
sorry. I'm sorry. What's my age again? Yeah, honestly, at some point it just starts to all blend together. But I'm 39, and the topic kind of came up where I think you had remarked, Neil, that I had talked about my age as if I was already 40 on like other post podcasts, and
Yeah.
I do kind of feel that way. Like once you hit 39, you're pretty much, it's just like a few months away from being 40 anyway. But yeah, I would have guessed like early 40s.
That's really flattering. And anyway, the revelation is coming, people. But so I let me
Chat room,
explain-
take a guess. Chat room, take a
Yeah,
guess. Everybody
yeah,
drop in your
chat room
light
to-
up the chat.
And
I think
How old is Neil?
at least yesterday the conversation I think stemmed from I sent you guys a birthday party invitation for a party I'm throwing myself next week for my 38th birthday.
Mm-hmm.
And I had asked Jordan, how do you feel about turning 38?
Yeah. And I feel fine about it, to be honest, but there is that part of me where it's like 37, you could still get away with mid 30s. Like, I don't know if I can say mid 30s anymore. I'm closer to 40. And I think the main issue I have with that stems from existential issues. 40, you double that, then you're at 80. That's like getting close to the end of the road if you have a good run. And that is something to swallow.
Well, why do you need to double it? Are you just suggesting like you want to know when you're at your midlife?
I guess I've done that much of my life. I like have doubled it because I know what it's like to live 38 years. Because that's all I have lived. So if I double that, if I basically lived my life again, where would I be? I think that's why I do it, because there's context that I can relate to.
Okay, interesting. I mean, what's the difference between doubling it at 38 and doubling it at 35? 70 for a lot of people.
6 years.
Okay, yes. But for many people, 70 is near the end of a life expectancy, or at least getting that much closer towards it.
Right. So I guess the point of the exercise is that with each passing year, I might feel more existential dread.
Right. And you know what? People feel this at any age. I mean, I might have, maybe felt it approaching 30, but yeah. So this all was like, stuff we were talking about, and I wasn't so much interested in everybody's actual ages as much as I was interested in seeing how they presented that information to others and their own reactions and their own sort of like sensitivities when they were talking about how old they were. And I guess we all felt like there was something here to maybe continue to riff on throughout the episode.
Yeah, I think it's an interesting question, just the nature of how we each individually relate to the story of age. So me turning 38, how do I personally make sense of that? Neil revealing his age to us. Did I or do I now think of that or him any differently? And so we all do this. We all have stories that we construct about everything. Much of this we're not conscious of or aware of. It's just a function of how we make sense of the world. But I think examining what our stories are, what's kind of under the hood, is both interesting, but can also be very productive, especially if we're telling ourselves stories that are neither truthful and or helpful.
Yeah, certainly. Now, this is, of course, the three of us identify as male, so we're coming very much from a male perspective. I understand this is a topic that I'm sure, women have been thinking about far longer than I think that the three of us may have. But I also don't know how often, I've really heard kind of men talk about maybe, their sensitivities towards ages. So Jordan, how do you feel about turning 40 or being closer to 40?
Yeah, don't put me there quite yet, Wai.
See?
So I think part of it for people is each time, or when you have a birthday, it's kind of an opportunity to reflect on where you are in life. So when I look back on how I've spent the gift of this life, from a relationship perspective, from a career perspective, from like a social cultural perspective, I actually feel good about that. And I think that if I didn't, I would start feeling like the clock ticking. Like, oh, fuck, my career isn't where I would like it to be. And I'm almost 40. I've kind of run out of time. And I could see that being a lot more difficult. That's why I said I think a lot of what I'm contending with is more of the existential stuff of like, I'm not going to be here forever. And granted, if I make it another 40 plus years, that would be a blessing. And that's a really long fucking time. And in the same breath, 40 years is nothing. So it's like the existential stuff. And then my metabolism isn't as productive, we could say, as it once was. I feel that. I have more gray hairs than I ever have. So like I see that. So more of the cosmetic stuff too is there's insecurities about that for sure. And it's definitely something that I think I pay more attention to now, not only as like a biomarker of aging, but also from like a vanity perspective. It's something that I'm not consumed by, but it's something I certainly notice and have feelings about.
Yeah. So it's the logical sort of like I don't know, attachments to the number that you might be thinking about.
I think so, particularly the ones that end in 0. That feel like real milestones along the way, where society almost deems that you ought, there's some sort of expectation of what that means, where you should be at in your life, what you should have achieved, things like that. For me, aging is more, particularly within the post-wrestling community, more something that I don't want. I'm conscious of what other people might assume. So I don't want to lead with how old I am when I meet somebody for the first time who I know to be younger than me. Let's say Eric, who's one of the younger contributors in the post-wrestling field. When I first got to know him, he hadn't graduated university, but I was in my 40s. I've been in my 40s since post started, so there's a good clue. I'm getting there, guys. I don't want to sort of like trail this too much.
Put a countdown clock up.
Yeah, and you picked me up on something yesterday, Wai. I know we don't normally talk about these conversations, but you sort of said I had mentioned that I was well north of 40 or some phrase like that.
So I think it was a bit of a sliding scale. I like in my mind it started off as like, yeah, I'm north of 40, and then maybe it was like well north of 40 at
well
some point.
North, yeah.
Yeah.
Miles north. Well, it's I'm 50, folks. Okay, I turned 50 this year. I was born in
God.
Yeah, imagine. I was born in 1973, so I turned 50 earlier this year, and that was You'll remember from our phone call yesterday that I really fumbled my way to saying it. I don't know why.
You're very self-conscious about it. Yeah,
I was, and it's the weirdest thing because my first thought afterwards was, geez, that felt really difficult to say. That was worse than coming out to somebody, which just sort of washes off my back. I don't care what people think about that. So it is weird. And I think it's just a case of being, I feel on some level, I know that I'm construed as being a bit younger than that. And I don't really want people to make assumptions that I ought to be the guy pottering around in the garden wearing a brown cardigan and smoking a pipe and kind of, that my best years are behind me. The kids have left for university, all of that kind of stuff.
You could rock a brown cardigan pretty well.
Yeah, everything you just described, I could see you doing.
Yeah.
Pottering in the garden isn't really my scene. But yeah, I'd probably have a brown cardigan somewhere. They were quite in a few years ago. But it's it's all of that, but I just don't sort of fit any of that template. So my hang-ups about age aren't really that personal. To me, it's just I've never really been a big celebrator of them. Just really quickly, when I turned 40 even, I didn't want a big deal made of it. But one of my very closest friends said, do you want to come down to Dublin? We'll just have a few drinks. We'll maybe have a meal. And I sort of expected it would be like 4 or 5 of us. But behind the scenes, he had been contacting pretty much all my friends. So I walked into this restaurant and everyone was there. And there's a big, yeah. Now, most of the time I would consider that a bit of a nightmare. But of course I had a wonderful night. But generally speaking, I'm not a birthday person. As they say, I just like to treat it as just another day.
Is that because you don't like the age thing and the aging process, or you're not as like egocentric as I can be?
Probably B, Jordan. I think, yeah. I don't know and I don't know that I would characterize it as being egocentric. It's just because I know loads of people, and it's very normal, love their birthdays as an excuse to have a bit of a party and get together with a bunch of friends. I just don't. And never really have. Even I don't think when I turned 30, I was, really gagging for a giant party, although I did have one, if I remember it right. This is all to say that, it's... I did feel very uncomfortable in saying it, although I feel like I've never really hidden it either. It's kind of a subconscious thing. I've always said I was in my 40s. I think if I was,
The hat.
trying to give a gauge.
The hat is very much a 40-year-old's hat.
The clues are there.
Well, in the YouTube comments, the guesses, we got 42, 48, 46, 42, 42. So you're doing good.
That is nice to hear. There's no two ways about that. I mean, that's very encouraging, And I feel like, I don't feel 50, whatever that should feel like, and I think that's why what we're talking about here. I don't have creaking joints when I get up in the morning, and I'm not sort of hobbling. I'm talking about a 90-year-old at this point, but I suppose when I was in my quick story, when I was before I turned 30, I remember joining my current workplace and there being a 50-year-old or someone who was 49 about to turn 50 as a co-worker. And I think I felt that I saw them as being a different generation, not maybe somebody I would connect with very well, those sorts of things. And I suppose part of it is projecting that onto other people. I don't want to be misunderstood as being out of touch and not knowing what the fuck's going on, not knowing what TikTok is, and dressing too young, or any of these other kind of judgments that people can make based on how old, based on a number, basically, which is kind of arbitrary. I feel like I haven't really changed very much in 15 much years, although there's, of course, a bunch of life experience there that teaches you lessons all the time.
So the concern is more about what others think rather than what you think yourself.
Yeah, it's others' preconceptions, I think, that they sort of write me off as old man Flanagan.
Mm-hmm. When it comes to, I guess, hitting those milestones myself, when you're 20, you think of 40 as just like, a dinosaur. Like you think of, I don't know what you would think of, but certainly not somebody who you even really want to be, certainly at that point. But when you get to that age, you recognize that things really aren't that different, at least not to me, at least. So, my perception of what it means to be 40 has continually changed the closer that I got to 40, just as it did when I got closer to 30. Like when you're 15, thinking about being 30 feels like, it's near the end of your life. But once you get there, it's just like, I feel the exact same as I did, maybe 5 years ago. Obviously, there are a little bit of differences here and there. But for the most part, I don't feel like that much of a different of a person. If anything, I feel like a better person. Like I feel a little bit wiser. We had kind of talked about how somebody might feel comfortable about their age and how somebody might not. Certainly a lot of it comes down to others' perception of what it means to be 40, and that's something none of us can really help, right? If I'm talking to a 15-year-old and I tell them I'm 39, I can't really change their perception. I can only assume that when they get to this age, they will realize it's not really that big of a deal themselves. But beyond that, I think, to Jordan's point, thinking about whether or not you if you had certain goals and expectations of yourself by a certain point in life, maybe assessing whether or not you've reached those milestones might have certainly a big effect on how you view, that age. And that'll vary according to the person, and maybe that'll change too, because you realize, oh, okay, like I'm 39, I'm not a millionaire yet. And you probably realize it's not that easy to be that, and it's perfectly fine to accept something like that, but it's an interesting topic. Do you guys have any other maybe thoughts you wanted to, jump off on?
When you mentioned the word dinosaur, of how a 15-year-old may perceive you, I experience that pretty often. So many of my clients are college aged, and typically if I'm giving music lessons to these are younger people, typically like high school, and some of these people I've worked with for many months, if not longer, and inevitably, typically when it's like getting close to my birthday, my age will come up. And so like some of my clients, they may hear I'm 38 and they're kind of stunned by that. And that's when I start feeling more like dinosaur, when I'm talking about like, oh yeah, my college experiences were 20 years ago. And I guess that's when I feel it. And look, that is a great problem for me to have. I fully acknowledge. I know people that are in their 20s that not only look far older, but just their energy and lifestyle feels way older than someone in their 20s. And I think that's also a big part of what we're talking about here. It's whatever you would define energy as, whether that's enthusiasm, personality, and so on. I think most describe me as more youthful in those terms. And I feel that, and that's something that I'm kind of intentional about. I try to be playful and childlike in good ways, while also being mature and developing wisdom in certain ways as well. But I experience that a lot. People are not just like it's not just that their eyes kind of light up and like, oh, huh, I thought you were a bit younger. It's like sometimes I'll get like, no fucking way, you're almost 38. But again, I think that's a great thing, and I'd imagine Neal, you're an example of that based on this poll we took. And Wai, I'd imagine that's a common occurrence for you too. Like, you don't look 40, Wai.
But what does it mean to look 40? Again, like how did we get this image of what a 40-year-old is supposed to look like in our head?
I'm sure, well, and maybe here's something I just landed on. I'm sure a lot of this stuff was constructed in our minds when we were much younger.
Yes.
And 40 looked a lot older.
Yeah.
Right.
And 50 even more so. I mean, I think of my parents' generation, of course, when I think of these things. They happened to get married. They happened to have got married when they were quite young. So I'm 50, but my mum's 73. So that's not a huge gap. And I have an older brother and a much younger brother who came late, who's 10 years younger than I am. So that's part of it. We're looking at that generation and thinking what 50 meant then. I think another part of it is just pop culture references to these things, which have changed. Here's what I really mean. If I look at my peers, people who know how old I am because I went to school with them, I was a classmate in school or in university, or I knew them from the neighborhood. They, to me, don't feel like a 50. Very few of them, at least, feel like what I used to think a 50-year-old would look like. Should you be wearing jeans when you're 50? Those sorts of things. It's a weirdness, and I think it's maybe tied to preconceptions that get baked in when you're quite young, because I don't know for sure that people in their 20s in 2023 feel, I don't know how they feel what a 40 or 50-year-old should be or look like or or have achieved. It's an interesting topic, and I have to say it has been on my mind over the last 24 hours since we discussed it, because I feel almost dishonest in a way, in that in several years not ever having kind of said, here's how old I am, but also having never been asked directly.
Yeah, I'd imagine. I guess I've never asked you straight up.
Nope.
You're like, how old are you, or what year did you graduate high school, or something like that?
No.
I don't know if I've asked really anybody how old their age is. It's not, honestly, not that big of a topic that I'm constantly thinking about. If anything, I think we get a sense more of our maybe relatability just through our interactions, and ultimately that's more important than the numbers that you've been, a number of years you've been on this planet.
Totally. Well, my honest first like question to Neal was, when I found out he was 50, was like, okay, so when did you graduate high school? And I think you said 1991. Yes. Yeah. Okay. So for me, where my mind goes is more cultural references. So I'm thinking, like, I didn't get to experience that transition of like hair metal culture to grunge culture. And apparently Neal did. So I was like, oh, fuck, Neal, like, you were there for the ascension of Nirvana. And Neal, you said, yeah, I saw them. Like, to me, that's very fascinating. So when I find out that someone is a particular age, that's where my interest will follow.
Yeah. And I think in a lot of our discussions, Jordan, one-to-one, we talk about pop culture a lot, music and sort of TV and things like that. And I don't feel like our experiences are radically different in how we related to them. But obviously there's a fairly hefty gap in what stage we were at when we experienced them. So yes, in 1992, Nirvana did a European tour about 6 months after, maybe a bit more after Nevermind came out the year before that. Nevermind came out in 91. They toured in Europe in 92 with Teenage Fan Club and the Breeders. And me and a bunch of friends went to see them at the King's Hall in Belfast. And it was amazing, you know. But I was... Yeah, that's not... Way has pulled up the ticket. I sent them a facsimile of it. That's not my one. Unfortunately, it's lost time. It was never, I don't think, even when I went through the door, in as good condition as the one that's on the screen right now. But yeah, that's it. The Monday, the 22nd of June, 1992.
So Neal, were you
I was
like
19? Whereas you know, were like, it's elementary school, I guess, you know.
At a show like this, are you more of a push mosher? Are you actually crowd surfing? Or are you the guy that, because you're taller, so and I'm not, so I'd be the one, I'd find someone like you who seemed friendly enough and tap you on the shoulder and point up so you could put your hands out and kind of lift me up into the crowd.
Like, I definitely did that. And there was a girl called Kelly who, a very good friend who's quite small still and still is, and so she was on my shoulders for quite a lot of the concert as well, which got a bit boring after a while. But yeah, at that age I was pretty wild. Yeah, I don't know. I wouldn't have been mosh pit adjacent, I would say.
Have you crowd surfed?
No.
What about you?
Assisted others.
Yeah,
I've never crowd surfed. I've been in mosh pits. Yes.
Why? Because you're not. And especially when you were younger, I don't know when you started going to rock shows, but I'm sure you were not the heaviest person in attendance. Why wouldn't you crowd surf?
It's a great question. Why have I never crowd surfed? I don't know if it necessarily looked that appealing to me.
Really, like, as a 14-year-old, there was nothing more appealing.
Yeah. I don't know what to say. I don't know if I ever maybe craved that sort of energy. I mean, if the opportunity came up and somebody was like, hey, like, I want you to crowd surf, and was actively going to, get me up there, I would have taken it, sure. But I never really kind of pursued it so much. Why don't you talk, like, what is the appeal to you, Jordan?
So the first time I did it, the HF Festival, this was the East Coast's largest rock radio festival of the 90s. And it's like maybe 98, 99. So I'm 13, 14 years old. I was late to puberty as well. So I was small, like 5 foot nothing, 100 pounds at most. So like I realized I was not a nuisance to others with crowd, because sometimes like a 300-pound man would want to do it, and that was a burden on the crowd. So also being very short, this was a football stadium where the DC football team plays. And so if I'm on the field, I'm not really seeing shit. Also, when your head kind of maxes out at like people's torso, it's hot. So the first time my brother and I crowd surfed, it was starting to become sunset. The band Bush was performing. We were dumb as fuck that we did it during the ballad Glycerine, because now we're navigating all these lighters in the air. But dude, the feeling of freedom, the feeling of like fresh air was amazing. Also, you get closer and closer to the stage if you're crowd surfing. So it was just like exhilarating, and we were light, so people could really like launch us like as we're kind of surfing along. Sometimes we'd get like pushed in the air, and there was like a feeling of both danger to it, but also this feeling of community and collaboration, and in general everyone's there to help take care of you and have like a fun experience together. Every now and then like a motherfucker would try to steal your shoe or like shove you a bit hard, but there was nothing more exhilarating at that time than doing something like that. At a club where maybe there's hundreds of people, sure, that can be fun. But when you're doing it amongst tens of thousands of people and traveling 50 yards, like super, super fun.
This looks a bit more like you, Jordan, on screen for people who are watching.
That kind of does look like me as a 20-year-old.
There's a very inappropriate hand in an inappropriate place there. But
well,
hey,
who comes with the territory. What's interesting? So, one of the men, the security personnel that would be at the right in front of the stage, but they would be facing the crowd, and their job often is when a crowd surfer is coming over the barricade, they are the ones to safely grab you and place you on the floor so you can exit out back into the crowd. And I also remember just some of these men were so kind and friendly, and to Justin and I, they felt like superheroes, like big, like muscular, it looked like wrestlers really. And they always accepted us. And I think part of it was we were young, like 13, 14, but we also, I think, looked even younger. And one of these guys, you kind of start to know these people over the years. And Justin and I would go to hundreds and hundreds of shows. And Merriweather Post Pavilion, the local amphitheater I go to, this guy, D. Wayne, he's still working concerts. He now is kind of like in the twilight of that career. He mans the pinball arcade section of this music venue. And I had a conversation with him earlier this year of like, hey man, you being cool to Justin and I actually made like a significant impression on us. Like an older guy that was like big and muscular, he seemed cool to us, accepted us as part of that music community. And I'm really glad I shared that with him, because in turn, he was like, yeah, man, we all kind of remembered you guys. We would talk about you guys, and you were part of like our community. We all liked you. And it's really special for me that decades later, I still have relationships with these people that ostensibly were paid to not make me like fall and break my neck. I don't know, it's really cool.
What was the last time you did it?
It's been a few years. I've done like a bit more mosh, but again, like it's part of the aging, to be honest. Like I've dislocated a shoulder a few years ago. Like I'm now more afraid to do stuff like that. Not because what if I fall? Because I feel like I can protect my fall or stuff like that. It's more, I just feel more physically fragile. And to be honest, that kind of sucks. And I think that's directly correlated with aging.
Interesting. I really admire people who, are able to do it. I think for me, I would have been so self-conscious that I would have wanted that attention anyway at such a big event. But I really admire people like because I think going to a concert or going to a wrestling event to me, like the biggest way you can enjoy those experiences is by not caring about, how you look dancing or like just you're there for the experience for yourself. And it sounds like you've took full advantage, Jordan. So or continue to even.
Yeah. Especially at wrestling. But again, it's like it's hard for me sometimes to lose myself in the fandom. So if I'm I saw Arctic Monkeys a couple weeks ago. That was very easy to lose myself in the fandom. I had great seats. They were incredible. Like just like right conditions. I was with the right people. It was so much fun to just be so into it and be so fully expressive personally, individually in the show. I wish a wrestling event or I wish a pro wrestler or a wrestling match could compel me so much to lose myself in it. Wei, you and I sat next to each other at Full Gear last year. I'm trying to remember, like, I think what certainly makes it easier are being around people like Braden and Davey, because they do that pretty effortlessly.
They're amazing. Yeah. They're amazing to be around.
Yeah, so it's great energy to kind of feed off of. They were my guests at the G1 Supercard show. Because of that, I knew that was going to be my last Ring of Honor event, and I wanted to enjoy it as a fan, and I trusted that they would be like ideal fans to be there with.
They're the guests you'd want to put in the front row in front of the hard cam just to kind of like, show that they're having a great time. That sort of thing.
And Neil, you were that at
at Forbidden Door.
At Forbidden Door.
And I do very clearly recall one point in that show during Osprey Omega in the final stretch with the entire crowd were biting on every 2 count, that I was actually jumping up and down like a little kid. And I remember that feeling and just thinking, wow, it's because a lot of the time I am more of an observer than a participant in those sorts of situations. But I certainly wasn't trying to play to the camera. I had no idea that we were featured as much, because I thought we were too close to the corner rather than what I see on WWE all the time with green t-shirt guy is the people right in the middle of the hard cam section. Yeah. So I thought we were just off camera. But apparently not. We were all over the.
I was going to ask you that though, if part of it was trying to be a helpful fan to the company, knowing that you were hard cam front row.
No, I think I was behaving as naturally as I probably would have anyway. Certainly was aware that there were camera operators at each, at the corner of the ring, and it was near where the wrestlers entered to get into the ring. I wouldn't have wanted to look really bored or have my back turned or anything like that. But yeah, at the same time, I was, I felt like it was very much in the moment.
Brandon was great for that.
I
think we can all agree.
Yeah.
Okay, so at this point, I do want to open it up to the room and everybody who's watching us live. If they want to talk about either this topic or really anything else on your minds, we are open to discussing anything here on the wellness policy, just as we did last month, which I really enjoyed. So we'll be trying to stick to some of that format throughout all of these episodes in the future. So if you want to call in, talk about anything, talk about this topic, do so right now. Let's first of all go to this person who has been waiting for quite a while. Saeed. Hey, Saeed from Vancouver. Welcome.
Hey, can you guys hear me?
Yes, we can.
What's up, Saeed?
Oh, no, not much. Just thought I'd call in and see how you guys are doing. It's been a rough weekend. I can say that at least. Since Friday, I've got no sleep. So, yeah, it's been definitely a rough one. And you guys have definitely been helping on the Discord channel and all that stuff. So,
yeah. I'm guessing maybe a lot of people listening aren't necessarily part of the Discord, but Saeed, earlier, you had suffered a tragedy through the workplace this week, and you had let a lot of us know on the Discord, and our condolences. It sounds like a really awful thing, and if we could provide any sort of solace through the Discord or through a show like this, I'm very honored that you found us.
Yeah, for sure. You guys have just definitely been a distraction, whether it be through the podcast of the Collision one on Saturday and just trying to listen to that and distract myself. But yeah, everyone says, like, yeah, it's sadly part of the job. It's what we sign up to do as police officers and all that stuff. But you just never think it's going to happen in your city, especially to someone that you talk to almost every day, you go to calls with, are supposed to go to wrestling with. And yeah, it's like it's one of those things now that I don't know if I'm gonna be going on Saturday and Sunday for Collision and Wrestle Dream. It's one of those things that I want to go, but how am I going to react when I get there? It's going to be one of those tough ones that you just don't know how you're going to react when you get there.
What are, if I can ask, Said, what are some of the fears of how you may react once you're there?
I don't know. Like I've been waking up from day to day with different feelings. Like today, I'm just completely numb to any feelings. People have been asking me how you're doing, and I just freeze. I'm like, yeah, I just don't know how I'm feeling. And yeah, it's just one of those things. And making that long 4-hour drive from Vancouver to Seattle, it's gonna be a long drive, obviously. And yeah, it's gonna be one of those things that I don't know. I'm probably gonna decide on the day if I'm gonna be going down or not.
I can't relate to such a shocking event as this, Saeed, but my instinct is that it's extremely early in your journey of healing here. I mean, you can share as much or as little as you want, but I mean, would it be true to say, like, do you feel like this is really even sort of sunk in at this point, or are you still processing?
Still doesn't feel real. Like at times when I can't sleep, I find myself driving to the detachment just to make sure it's real and thank those other cities that have come in and done overtime for us, because obviously none of us is supposed to be working right now. So yeah, you just go to work, see the memorial that's been set up outside, and yeah, it just sinks in that it's real, and you go home and you still can't believe it. It's just one of those things that just you go back and forth on. The mind is a weird thing sometimes when you just can't really let it click in sometimes that something like that's happened.
Do you have support at work that you're able to take advantage of?
Yeah, they've been giving us a lot of support. Yeah, they've been amazing with that kind of thing. They've been bringing in victim services and all the support that we can get right now. So yeah, like I was telling someone in Discord, you talk about it a lot with everybody, but the healing thing is pretty slow sometimes. The process is just going to take a bit of time, and all you can do is distract yourself. And that's where the internet sometimes is a wonderful place at night to distract yourself with, whether it be wrestling, podcasts, music. It's one of those things.
Well, hey, we everybody here, everybody watching right now, everybody listening right now, we all wish you, strength in your continued healing process, and want to thank you for, sharing.
Yeah, for sure, guys. Thanks.
Thank you, Saeed.
Take care, Saeed.
All right, let's go to up next, Corey. Hey, Corey, welcome.
Hey, how's it going, guys?
What's up, Corey? Nice to meet you, bud.
Great job on Postmarks. I really enjoyed the episode.
Thank you. Thank you. Appreciate it. Yeah, no, it's funny that you guys brought up specifically like music and your experiences in like music subculture in relation to age, because I find that is lately, and really most of the time, because it's just so intertwined in my life, that's how I really find the barometer of how old I've become. I've been noticing a lot of bands doing 10-year album anniversary shows for albums I liked when I was like graduating college. And then when it hits the 20-year anniversary tour, that's when I start checking around myself for a second. Have the walls eroded? Like,
I'm there right with you, because like I would say like I was maybe among my deepest into like music that was like new at the time, around like 2002 2003, and all of those things are like celebrating their 20th anniversary releases, which is nuts to me.
Yeah, it's like I'm going to go to a 10-year anniversary show for the album Sunbather by Deaf Heaven in November, and that's like I distinctly remember where I was when that album came out. I was in Brooklyn at a show, seeing them. I had graduated college. It was a very different time in my life. And I, this intertwining of age and subculture is so very interesting to me. I think about it a lot, actually. For most of my teens and early 20s, I had been very involved in like hardcore punk, booking hardcore punk shows, going to shows with my friends, traveling up and down the Eastern Seaboard. And and the one thing that when you always meet someone new and you're relating it to music, they always say, well, what's the best show you've ever been to? That's like the first thing. And Neal, you were talking about how there's never really been a time where you've had to like talk about your age or anything like that. When your birthday was, of course, like, why is that relevant to a conversation? But when I tell someone the best show I ever been to was seeing the Dillinger Escape Plan at the Virgin Megastore in 2005, suddenly they're like, wait, I was like, I don't know, 10. I was 8 when that show happened. And I'm like, oh, huh. Yeah, I guess it's one of those things where, aggressive music in particular always tends to attract younger audiences. I also run in, I in the last couple of years, I've gotten really deep into fashion, specifically a niche of fashion that is very much what I would consider a young man's game in a lot of ways. And those people, whenever I talk, and a lot of people in that community, whenever I talk about music, that's really when it becomes apparent, like, oh, I might be one of the old men in the room here. And also, for the record, I was not just a crowd surfing and moshing person. I was a stage diving, crowd killing, head walking, like,
oh, dude. So
menace.
I've seen Dillinger twice. The most recent was maybe 11, 12 years ago at Bonnaroo, but I've seen him in a smaller rock club, maybe 200 people. And that may have been the first time I've seen a guitarist, when a song kicks in, just run directly off the stage onto heads and shoulders of people paying to be there. That blew my mind.
They had the nickname of being called the Dillinger Insurance Plan because they would absolutely just demolish a place. That band is so important to like my youth. I've seen them maybe like 10 or 12 times. In a number of different sizes of venues. I went to their last show. But for me, music is so intertwined with how I feel about my age. As I've gotten older, I've started to gravitate towards more like electronic music. Like, I've always been into electronic music, but I finally got out of my own head a little bit, and I decided, you know what? If there's a night where like a DJ I like is not on super late, I will go. And it's usually like, and it's not like, like I'm not going to see like Tiesto. I'm going to like, German, like bear can, like truly oppressive, monolithic, like this is the soundtrack to a brutalist architecture hellscape type shit. And I'll go and it's very apparent that everyone around is younger than me, has more endurance than me, and is on way more drugs than me because I could not fathom doing that to my body anymore. And I remember being outside of a club one night, just like catching a breath with some friends, and a girl, she strikes up a conversation with me. I'm like, oh, I don't usually go to these things. I mostly go to like metal and hardcore shows. And she said, oh, what's your favorite band? And then I had the Dillinger Escape Plan talk, to which she said, oh, wow, I didn't realize you were that old. Do you have cocaine? No, I don't. I guess I am old. Maybe check that guy over there. And it's moments like that make me think, do I have it in me anymore to go to these things? Because sometimes you can love a thing and your body doesn't love you back.
I could not do Bonnaroo anymore. And I did it 5 years in a row in my early to mid 20s. And it was heaven on earth. That was like the Christmas I looked forward to every year. But the dust, the oppressive heat, the tent, the going till sometimes sunrise and then starting again by noon. I don't think I physically could do that.
Oh yeah.
And that's like, honestly, like I'm kind of bummed about that because I would love to do that.
I cannot do festivals anymore. It will destroy my body. I got tickets to a band that is on like my bucket list of like bands I've regretted never seeing because I skipped out on. I got one more chance, but I got to drive from, and it's not even a bad drive. It's like 3 hours from where I live in New York to Philadelphia to go see this band. But then it's another 3 hours back. What time is it going to be when that show ends? When am I hitting my bed? How am I going to wake up the next morning? These are all things I'm thinking about. And that's sort of my pivot into my other thing, which is like my association with aging. And this is sort of a more negative thing is deterioration. I look at, my parents, I look at my grandmother, I look at, older people in my family and, they aren't the person they were a couple years ago. My aging is related to how I look at fitness. Like I'm not doing fitness to look better. I'm doing fitness to stave off like aging and my body deteriorating and all of my senses dulling at an accelerated rate. If I keep my cardio up, my heart will be better. I'll be able to go up the stairs the same way in 10 years and 20 years. If I keep up like a good resistance training regimen, I'll be able to lift things like I used to, or like at least stave it off for a couple of years. Aging is like the fear of aging maybe is like the animus behind like me approaching a healthier lifestyle. And maybe that's a little unhealthy in its own way because it's driven by a certain degree of fear, but it's a damn well good motivator.
Yeah.
We should be afraid of our health declining, right? I mean, aren't we all, thinking about our survival?
Well, it's the avoidance of suffering, essentially.
Mm-hmm.
So you guys may have heard about this stuff. I have a very elementary understanding, but I believe that the term is telomeres, which are like the end caps of our DNA, perhaps. But from my understanding, these are actually more accurate biomarkers of the aging process, way more than the number of years we've been alive. And I am pretty confident in saying that if we do things like exercising and being in healthier social relationships and eating good food and drinking clean water, then those telomeres will erode less quickly. Mm-hmm. That's my understanding of it.
Yeah.
So I totally am in agreement with you, Corey, that being proactive in order to not only elongate our health, but to have a more enjoyable existence while we are alive, why wouldn't we want to do that?
Of course. I guess my only concern with myself from maybe a psychological perspective is this driven by fear more than anything else? Should I like be more brazen in my embracing of like my age and being more proactive about my health? Because this is very much more like, I'm not trying to die. I don't want my body to deteriorate. Am I losing my hearing more, et cetera, et cetera, et cetera? Because I think there is a difference between, motivation by fear and motivation by self-empowerment.
Totally. And like with most things in life, there's a balance, and these things aren't all or nothing typically. So yeah, if it's to the point of obsession and where it's actually by being so committed to or mindful of avoiding aging, even maybe to the point where it's creating more distress or more suffering or even delusion. then I'd argue that you're kind of steering off into an end where, then it's no longer helpful nor productive.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm. And that's all I wanted to bring up, guys. This is a wonderful podcast. Glad I could finally drop in and talk with y'all.
Appreciate you, Corey.
Nice to meet you, Corey.
Thank you so much, Corey. Always appreciate your calls. And again, listen to Postmarks on the Post Wrestling Cafe feed. That is free and available to everybody. Bruce and David got to know Corey a whole lot better than I think he was able to convey just now. So always a pleasure to speak to him. Let's go up next to Stefan. Welcome, Stefan. Welcome back to the Wellness Policy.
Hey guys, how's it going?
Hey, good to see you, Stefan.
Nice to see you guys as well. And with regard to age, my age-related stories are kind of weird in that they're the funniest ones are kind of tangentially related to wrestling anyway. When I was hired at my current job, it was a couple of days before Randy Savage passed away. And when it happened, obviously being such a big news story, I had, I think it was like a news update or something that John put out playing at my desk. And a couple of friends had heard that I was listening to wrestling news. And somebody came by and asked me the question, talking about WrestleMania 3 and talking about Hogan Andre and how he was a little boy when that happened. And then he turned to me and asked me, how old were you when that happened? And I told him, well, I wasn't born yet. And at that moment, you just kind of see his face blanch. Or a couple of years later, I think it was either All In or just after All In when AEW was starting, and they were bringing in Aja Kong. I had a couple of boys over, and we were drinking beers. And when I told one of my buddies that Aja Kong was coming, he straight faced, who's Aja Kong? And it didn't even click how much younger than me he was. I, honest to God, thought he was joking. I said, that's funny. It's a good one. I took a drink, and he looked at me just completely dead-faced, and I realized he has no idea who Aja Kong is. He came in much younger than I did to the scene, so he had no idea who she was, and I pulled up older matches, and it was a unique experience. But the thing that I find most interesting is something that Neal said, I think it was Neal, about he said wisdom that comes with age. And for me, I just use the term perspective. And the way that I always think about it is one of my favorite television shows outside of, wrestling, is Babylon 5. In the penultimate episode of the entire series, spoiler alert, a character does something horrendously out of character, or at least I assumed was horrendously out of character. And I hated it. And the first time I watched that, I was 21. I didn't see it. When I rewatched the show later, I was maybe 26, 27, had grown up a little bit in the world. I started to see that character turn that I thought was so out of nowhere was actually being carefully seeded from the beginning. And it was a behavior that I just hadn't encountered in my life, in real life, at that point. So I didn't recognize the signs when it was being broadcast to me in a television show. And it wasn't until that had, grown up a bit. And now all of a sudden it's, now I see what's happening here. I did not catch this even 5 years ago. And I think that's been the most interesting part of it, aside from the fact that it appears that once you turn 35, your body turns into that sugar glass and everything just breaks. So that's kind of where I am.
So you watched like you watched Babylon 5 differently with your life experience, and your takeaway was that things are like, were you just better at watching or
no? So in particular, I had never dealt with, for lack of a better term, a particular type of manipulative person before. I had never had any kind of experience with that kind of personality. So when it was being presented in the show, I viewed that personality the way that I, as a individual, would view that sort of a manipulative personality in my real life. Having then been manipulated and been burned in my real life, I go back and now I can see signs in fiction that I never saw before, and realize that sometimes things that I hand waved as bad writing was actually maybe just me not understanding things that well.
Understood. Thank you so much for the call, Stefan.
No problem.
Thanks,
Much
Stefan.
appreciated as always.
Yeah, it makes me think of one of my favorite shows this year, which is Beef on Netflix. And the opening scene is kind of a bit of a road rage incident. And that's not a spoiler because it's the first thing you see when you watch it. And I highly recommend this show. It's absolutely tremendous. And I reckon if I was a teenager watching it, I would think that the female lead character was just completely crazy from, what's going on. But I think with the perspective of age, when you see what her life is like and the pressure that she's under, she's kind of just snapped in that moment. That feels a little more understandable when you've got a few years under your belt, I guess.
I feel like you can probably have a similar experience, or I'd probably be able to have a similar experience with a lot of different media, whether it be like movies I watched as a teenager that I probably appreciate in a much, different level right now, or albums that I might have listened to when I was younger that I probably had no life experience to really be able to appreciate until now. So
I think also one of the, sorry, Jordan, if you were, but you can talk to this definitely, is that two of the things we speak about the most are wrestling and music, and people who are really into both of those things are generally into back catalogs as well. You get Beatle heads who are 19 years old, and people who are really into wrestling who raid the network for, want to see every WrestleMania and stuff like that. So you can connect regardless of age, I think, on those parts of popular culture that most of this community, in fact, are very engaged in.
Yeah, very much so. And it's almost like a bit of an equalizer, like I've enjoyed like a really great friendship with Dan the Mouth Labransky over the years, and we're very different. There's a big gap between us in age, but we'd always just bond over like our conversations about like old records that I was like digging up that he obviously would have owned and knew everything about. So again, like that's what I look more for in sort of my social relationships, is not so much the number, but like what we can actually communicate through.
But on the flip side to that, where my mind went, and I appreciated Stefan bringing up wrestling, just I didn't really go there in my thinking during this chat, but it's like the age that we got into it, and for many of us, you get into it as like younger kid, like that becomes a romanticized period for us. And I think that is really dependent, if not on our age, well, then when we did get into it. So I'm assuming the three of us, we found wrestling at a much younger age. I was born in 1985, and I fell in love with wrestling in like 1990. I think the first pay-per-view I watched was Survivor Series 1991, or at least watched live. And so if I'm looking for comfort food, if I'm feeling sick and just in bed and I'm going to watch wrestling, I'm typically watching wrestling from 91 to, let's say, 96, because even though some of that may not be objectively the best material, for me, it just feels comforting, because that's where not only my love and fascination of wrestling began, but it's also tied to this sense of youthfulness where, at least for me, because I'm blessed, that sense of childhood felt safer and more innocent and just like a softer place to be, especially if I'm feeling sick. But then it's odd, like during lockdown, one of the things I enjoyed doing on the Up Next Twitch channel every now and again with Eric Marcotte, who's significantly younger, was we would watch WWF Superstars 1992 and just chat about it in real time in a watch along style. And I guess I don't know if I asked him, but like, what was his fascination? Like, why did he know so much about that? Because like a lot of it sucked, to be honest. Like the Berserker. But again, but I can also say the Berserker was fucking awesome. But I think because I was introduced to him as a 6 or 7 year old. But yeah, to me, that's where my mind went of, like, again, the band Bush. I loved that band, but I was 11 years old. I listen to much of that stuff now, and it's like, okay, well, I've matured. And similar things could be said about wrestling, but I still have a soft place in my heart for a band like Bush because of what those songs and that band meant to me as an 11-year-old.
I don't want to speak for Eric, of course, but I would like he comes across to me like the type that is just very much like he's very studious when it comes to his hobbies, you know,
completionist.
A completionist, sure.
Yeah, he certainly is with MMA, you know.
Yeah. And I would assume his fascination with that era would be similar to his fascination with almost any era, where he just seems to be a man who he's a sponge for information and probably just has a curiosity and a knowledge for almost every era of professional wrestling. But if you ask him what his like maybe warm and fuzzy, you know, nostalgic version of like, you know, 91 Superstars was for you, Jordan, I mean, I guess I would assume what?
Like
2000 bomb,
right? Which
with Batista, probably.
And those are the things that make me feel old,
right?
Well, the weirdness, Jordan, is that I feel the same way about that era of wrestling, even though I was, you know, well into my teens, you know, at that time. But the difference being there was this sort of gap on this side of the Atlantic, at least, where there was no televised wrestling. The ITV stuff, World of Sport, that you hear talked about a lot, had kind of died off, or people weren't really interested in it anyway. It was more older people. It wasn't really for kids. So wrestling, WWF at that time sprang onto the scene, and teenagers were as into it as younger kids at that point. So I have very fond memories of that too, and I'm lucky enough to associate it with a happy time in life. You know, it's I had a great time at school, so you know, I can relate to that, even though there's rather a gap in the age that we were when we experienced it.
Let's go to one more call here, and it comes to us from Hansi.
What's going on, man?
Hey, Hansi.
I was hesitating to call in because like everyone's talking about music and all that, and I guess like the only age thing that I can like kind of like convey is that I don't know, maybe with my old age and you know, and again, this is probably my fault for in like being too online since like, you know, for the past like, you know, 10 years I kind of been isolated because, you know, I've, you know, had my mental problems and all that kind of stuff. But like being at like seeing how like society is kind of rebooted, it's like amazing to like see that like a new wave of like conservative type propaganda that's like kind of seeping into entertainment that I recognized that like I used to be falling for 20 years ago. And it's like amazing because there's people who are now like in their 20s who are born like after 2000. They don't recognize like the real loop that has kind of been done. And I feel like, you know, more people are kind of like it, which makes me depressed, I guess, getting older, just to see more people kind of fall for regressive type of you know, regressive type of attitudes, basically. Like, you know what I mean? Like, you thought, like, in the 2010s, we were going into more because those more progressive type of ideas that were being pushed out there a little bit, like, you know, accepting of, like, you know, diversity, LGBTQ people and all that. And it just seems like in the 2020s, with, like, a lot of the overall discourse and, like, what entertainment also seeps in with that, what the call we're regressing, you know what I mean? And I hesitate to call in because I didn't want to turn this into a political thing, but I guess that's like the only thing that age-wise that I can kind of see that kind of is like kind of the same from when I was a kid, but now being amplified like on a Red Bull, I guess, if that makes sense.
Hansi, I'm curious if you're willing to share, when you say like conservative culture or media, what were you consuming 20 years ago?
Like okay, what I mean is like, okay, I feel like in general, like when you don't know anything about politics, right, and you just kind of go, okay, I'm just gonna consume entertainment. I feel like elements of like a lot of quote unquote edgelord stuff, I feel like it's always kind of trying to make us go more regressive, like by telling you that, oh look, they embrace not hey, you shouldn't say these words. that automatically means, oh, you should say these words, and this is why it's freedom of speech to say the N word or the gay slur or something like that. And you're like, yeah, man, that's sticking it to the system, kind of in a way. So I feel like that's always been implemented, and I feel like now with like everything is like always defined, like every like product, it's always defined by, oh, is it woke or is it not woke? And then there's
I
like,
see.
back and forth with it, and it feels like there's more of a movement to kind of go against any kind of social wokeness that's going on. Even though, like, wokeness is not bad, but maybe the way it's presented on a watered down front, it makes it easy for people to go, oh, I want that regressive type of stuff, if that makes sense. You know what I mean? That's why I was hesitating to call it. I didn't want to turn this into a whole thing, but like, when age goes on, I think I become more like, before I used to be more open to go, hey, everyone has their opinion, whatever. I think now with the old age, I'm like, you know what, I'm ready for this game to be over. Like, can I please leave? Can I, if everyone else wants to embrace it, go ahead, whatever. But can I please just get the fuck out of here? That's kind of where I'm at in my head, at least.
Or just get offline.
No, I mean, but when it seeps into, like, when you go into like personal, like when you go into like social gatherings and everyone's like trying to be an over the top character, everyone's like, oh, I'm gonna be the character, like, then it's like, dude, even everyone else's brains are fried or whatever. You know what I mean? That's why I don't even like, kind of being social as much anymore. You know what I mean? But you're right. I should be offline, but you know what I mean? I'm again, another reason why, maybe I shouldn't be here, because I mean, like, I'm kind of too, stupid. You know what I mean? Like, I don't know, like, so, like, you know what I mean? I wanted to call in, but like, I also didn't want to call in because at the same time I didn't want to like put the mood down with it. But like, you know what I mean? You guys talk about age, and I just feel like as I grow older, I'm kind of like intolerant to like not want to waste my time with like social games, basically. You know
That's
what I
a
mean?
good thing, though. Like, that demonstrates maturity. Like, thank goodness, 20 years later, those things are not interesting to you anymore. And you see it as, if not mean-spirited, then at least as more immature. And look, if there's people that you have a personal relationship that you see doing some of that stuff with, then perhaps you can lovingly check those people. When I was 13, I said and thought a bunch of stupid shit. And when I was 23, same is true. And I may watch this 20 years from now and be like, God damn, Jordan, like, why did you go on YouTube and say some of these things live? So some of it's relative. Also, like, people are people. So you may have been 13 thinking and saying dumb shit. Why wouldn't other 13-year-olds in 2023 be doing the same things? A lot of it's immaturity. I think the internet changes the dynamics of this stuff, and we can go a lot deeper and more narrow in the niches of certain subcultures and schools of thought. And there's good and bad that comes with that. But from everything you're presenting, Hansi, the punchline I'm getting is that 20 years later, you've just matured.
If you call it mature, I guess, like, no, I guess, like, just seeing, like, maybe because everyone took for granted, and that's probably why again, to my own fault, to my own detriment, like that. Maybe I watch, like, like, I'm too much in my loop of my love for Sopranos, and maybe because when I originally watched it, I kind of just wanted the mafia and just to see cool, like, lines being spewed. And now that I watch it, like, 20 years later or so, I'm looking at it, I'm like, wow, they really, like, did a good job with explaining current day mental illness. Like, you know what I mean? Like, it's actually kind of amazing how ahead of like, a lot of shows carried on from that. Like, they made In Treatment after Sopranos came on, right? And so, like, you know what I mean? People capitalized off of the whole psychology thing. But, like, just watching it back and looking at, like, social situations and mental illness, I just never realized how much realistic that part was. So that's probably a little bit to do with, like, kind of like me kind of thinking back. But it's just like, I just think that, like, as a society, we think we move forward, but then at the same time, when people go, oh, like, how could you have thought that 20 years ago, when, like, there was people that were kind of speaking out against, like, racism or homophobia? But you're like, there's, like, elements of, like, an over the top version that gets called out, but then there's like an other portion of like normalized racism or homophobia or transphobia that exists that we as society don't like. Here's an example. We talk about like boundaries for women, right? 20 years ago, I'm thinking, okay, it's wrong to just like touch a woman randomly, right? But then on television, you see Ben Affleck on TRL grabbing a woman's like titty, and that's like, well, look at you, that's sexual assault. But then like the whole entire audience is applauding, and they're just thinking like 20 years ago, like that, even though it's always been inappropriate, you think about that and you're like, okay, so like as a society, we just kind of like applauded that. But like, you know what I mean? Like Ashton Kutcher making like inappropriate jokes and all that. You're like, oh yeah, man, that's hilarious, blah, blah, blah. But then you look at it 20 years later, but then you see a current crop of people that do the same kind of thing. But it's like, we only condemn the past stuff. But even though we're still like having current people do the same kind of regressive level, like if that makes sense. I don't know if I'm making sense, and I'm kind of going all over the place, but I apologize.
Well, I think there's still people out there. It's not. I think there's people out like in the world now, seeing or observing bad behavior and calling it out. I think that's the moral thing to do. Well, but again, I'm also not so naive to believe that 20 years from now, again, I may look at how I've presented publicly and be like, "Damn, Jordan, that was kind of not cool."
Yeah, no. I mean, yeah, no. I definitely, I think like you have a valid point with that. I just think that like that like I just thought like like I thought we would be more far off, but I guess because
I see
you notice that everything's in a loop, and you think by now we would have kind of corrected some of the like even though I think we have, I think like there's more space for people to be vulnerable, because 20 years ago you couldn't be vulnerable about mental illness. Everyone just kind of put it down and kind of tell you, oh come on, just go and do that. What are you talking about? Put all that mind stuff in, put that away, whatever, right? There's more like I know we're more open in that regard, but I also think that like there's always gonna be, I guess there's always gonna be a new crop of people that are always gonna try to like poison the well a little bit, right? And it becomes kind of depressing to see it go over and over again, even though like most of us have matured from 20 years ago, obviously. But the reason why I brought 20 years ago up is because I just noticed a kind of a trend where like you don't realize that because you've been alive for like 40 years basically, that like there's people that didn't experience what like late 90s, early 2000 culture was, and all they've kind of grown up on was the quote unquote diversity woke kind of era, where now this kind of new stuff of like some of the regressive stuff in the early 2000s is now kind of making a comeback on its own. So that's like the only thing age-wise. I don't really get to go to concerts and all that kind of stuff, so I apologize for taking the show off the rails, whatever. I just wanted to call in and chime in, but because the topic was age and all that kind of stuff, and this is the only thing that I can kind of convey with like getting old now, I guess, in my personal. So I apologize.
We all have our sort of like measuring sticks to see how time passes, and I guess for you it's your relationship to that sort of political discourse. And for Jordan, it's music, So yeah, thank you for chiming in.
Yeah, for sure. And in a way, I want to say that I did. It's because I'm in the same age group as you. Whatever. It is weird seeing like 20-year anniversary of like albums and all that kind of shit. That like to me felt like it was just yesterday that I was downloading it. You know what I mean? Like it's gonna be the 20-year anniversary of Godson with Nas, whatever. And I remember yesterday that I was downloading it, like crying my eyes out to some of the songs, whatever, because it was like so. I just Nas is one of my favorite artists, whatever. But
are you going to the show on the weekend?
What show?
He's playing with Wu-Tang on Sunday.
Where, Toronto?
Yeah.
Oh shit! I'll go check for tickets. I definitely want to go. Are you going?
Yes, I am. Yes.
All right. Well, hopefully, if I get tickets, I'll see you there, man.
Okay. There you go.
Peace out, man.
All right. feel old together, celebrating 20 years of Godson. Thank you all, everybody. We have a bit of a heart out here, so we got to get out of here. But thank you, all of you guys, for having the courage to come on the show and to talk and to share some of your thoughts on whatever's on your mind. Especially, I want to thank Jordan Goodman and the ultra courageous Neal Flanagan. Our man, not old man, our man, Neal Flanagan.
Thank you
for revealing his age on this show.
Well done, Neal.
Thanks, guys. I'm very emotional. I have no idea how old Corey is. So, it's just part of these things where you listen to people talk about how old they are and you go, I don't know how old you are. I think we're blessed in this community. We all look a bit, and this sounds like I'm tooting my horn, but I think we all look a little younger than we are. Three of us do anyway. Again, I find that Jordan, you look and present like someone in their 20s. So that is kind of weird to feel that you're going to turn 38. Wai, you haven't changed a bit since that screen grab I sent you from the Pride Parade, which was many moons ago. So,
clean water. What else did you say, Jordan?
I think real food, meaningful
food.
relationships.
Yeah,
that's it. Okay, everybody. We'll be back here next week or next month, I should say. We don't know what we're going to be talking about yet, but we'll let you guys all know. Join us in the Discord, postwrestling.com/Discord. The Wellness Policy channel is where you can interact with all of us and let us know what you think about these shows. Until next time, I'll talk to you later. Bye-bye.